All right, for February 13th is family service, and so Mark will be covering that one. So this is for February 20th. We will be on week 2 of our Hall of Fame and Shame series. So to recap, Abram gave God his life by saying yes when God said to move out of Ur, and he went, and he didn't know where to go, and he went where God said. Did Abram do this perfectly? 100% no, but he did it a lot right. He did it enough right that God said his faith is credited to him as righteousness. So he also showed his righteousness when he went and he rescued Lot, and they were coming back and they ran into Melchizedek, and who was a king as well as a priest, and Abram gave him his tithe from the plunder, recognizing him as a priest. And I'll probably relate that to Jesus as priest and king as well. So today we were talking about Hannah and her husband Elkanah. Emphasis on Hannah, but both of them. So we're going to read from 1 Samuel chapter 1, and it's going to be a combination of reading and Bible storytelling. So starting verse 1. A certain man from Ramathaim in the hill country of Ephraim was named Elkanah. He was the son of Jeraham. Jeraham was the son of Elihu. Elihu was the son of Tohu. Tohu was the son of Zuph. Elkanah belonged to the family... Did I start? Yeah, I did. Elkanah belonged to the family line of Zuph. We said that already. He had 2 wives. One was named Hannah. The other was Peninnah. And Peninnah had children, but Hannah did not. Year after year, Elkanah went up from his town to Shiloh. He went there to worship and sacrifice to the Lord, who rules over all. Hophni and Phinehas served as priests of the Lord at Shiloh. They were the 2 sons of Eli, which we will learn later are bad guys. Let's first note, it was normal, it was cultural in this time to have more than one wife. We think that is weird and inappropriate, and not a good plan, as well as God says no. And so let's recognize that and move on. Another thing that was normal then and is not now is for women to be embarrassed and to be shamed when they couldn't have children, when they didn't have children. They didn't know medically that could be either his body or her body, or just nah. So it was shameful to not have children. Peninnah had several children. Hannah had none. And this is another family scenario where we see favoritism. And, hey, multiple wives, not a good idea. Elkanah liked Hannah more than he liked Peninnah. And so Penny would tease and be mean to Hannah a lot. So, because she had children, and she was jealous of Hannah's relationship with Elkanah. So picking back up again in verse 9. One time when they had finished eating and drinking at Shiloh, Hannah stood up. So they're there to worship. Eli the priest was sitting on his chair by the doorpost of the Lord's house. Hannah was very sad. She wept and she wept. She prayed to the Lord. She made a promise to him and she said, Lord, you rule over all. Please see how I am suffering. Show some concern for me. Don't forget about me. Please give me a son. If you do, I will give him back to the Lord. Then he will serve the Lord all the days of his life. He will never use a razor on his head. He will never cut his hair. Sorry, I'm going back to look. I'm going to make myself a note. Were they Levites? You get this part because it's a rabbit trail. All right, so Hannah's prayed. We're moving on. So what is Hannah praying for? A son. Not even just a child. She prays specifically for a son. What does Hannah declare that she believes about God? She says, she declares him as Lord, and she says, you rule over all. What does she promise God? She says, I will give him back to the Lord. Then he will serve the Lord all the days of his life. He will never use a razor on his head. He will never cut his hair, which was a Nazirite type vow, similar to John the Baptist. The reason I rabbit trailed there is because the Levites are the priests, and so he doesn't become a priest. He becomes a prophet. It's interesting because Eli is a priest. He is of the right tribe, but he doesn't follow God as closely, and his sons are in complete rebellion, and yet they are still priests. And so it's just kind of that interesting the way things were done then with the tribes and the different jobs, and that was God's plan, was that this is what you do, and yet sometimes it didn't fit. Interesting thoughts. Okay. So moving on to verse 19. So she promises God, if you give me a son, I'll give him back to you. Early the next morning, Elkanah and his family got up. They worshiped the Lord. And then scripture tells us, then they go home. Hannah conceives, and she ends up birthing a baby boy. If you continue reading in Samuel, you will learn that when it's time the next year to go back to Shiloh and to worship and to sacrifice, Hannah tells Elkanah, I'm going to stay here with Samuel. You go ahead and go. When Samuel's old enough, I'm going to take him and we'll dedicate him. We'll leave him there then when he's old enough, after he's weaned, which generally at this time is preschoolish age, so around 3. Elkanah says, okay. He says, that's fine. And we noticed before this that he lets her name the baby Samuel. And this is really odd because always the daddy names the baby, and he yields to her when she says, no, I have a special name for him that he's supposed to have, that he's Samuel. So he goes to worship. I'm sure Penny goes with him. All of that's normal. It's just Hannah and Samuel stay home. And so then a few years go by, however many, while she's weaning him. And then it says, chapter 1, verse 24. When the boy did not need her to breastfeed him anymore, she took him with her to Shiloh. She took him there even though he was still very young. She brought him to the Lord's house. She brought along a bull that was 3 years old. She brought 36 pounds of flour. She also brought a bottle of wine. The bottle was made out of animal skin. After the bull was sacrificed, Elkanah and Hannah brought the boy to Eli. Hannah said to Eli, pardon me, sir. I'm the woman who stood here beside you praying to the Lord, and that's just as sure as you are alive. I prayed for this child. The Lord has given me what I asked for. So now I'm giving him to the Lord. As long as he lives, he will be given to the Lord. And there Eli worshiped the Lord. So she keeps her part of the bargain. She takes Samuel. Elkanah goes with her. It's that whatever year it is to go back and offer sacrifice and worship that time of the year. She goes. It's super interesting to me that it says she brought him. She took the sacrifices. She took all the things that were needed to make atonement, to offer him all of these things. She did that, and Elkanah was in agreement with her. But Elkanah was not leading this, which I think is cool because she's the one who prayed for it, and she's the one that made the commitment. So they go. She tells Eli, hey, I'm the one that you thought was crazy, and then you blessed me, and this is what God did, and I'm keeping my word. And Eli worships the Lord. And part of me wonders, why? Is he seeing the juxtaposition between his relationship with his sons and his faith in his sons, and seeing this mama with her son? Don't know. All right, moving on. Chapter 3, verse 19. As Samuel grew up, the Lord was with him. He made everything Samuel said come true. He prophesies. So all the Israelites recognized that Samuel really was a prophet of the Lord. Everyone from Dan all the way to Beersheba knew it. The Lord continued to appear at Shiloh. There he made himself known to Samuel through the messages he gave him. I would totally expect the kids to ask, He made everything Samuel said come true. So if Samuel said, it's going to rain today, did it rain because Samuel said it or because God wanted it that way? So prophets speak messages that God gives them, right? And this is in the New Testament. God promises what you ask you will receive when you ask in my name according to my will. So this is not Samuel went, I would like 6 children to come to temple today so that I can play with them. And 6 children show up. That's what's happening. Samuel is prophesying. He's giving God's word to people. And because it's what God says, it happens. There was another thing. Oh, I'll have to look up the distance between Dan to Beersheba. Because if I were them, I would ask that. So, here again, the question for this entire series is, who do you think in this true Bible happening should be in the Hall of Fame, who gave their life to God, and how did they give their life to God? Okay, so I would expect to hear Hannah, because she is asking, she's trusting God for things. She's asking him, and then she keeps her part of the deal. Samuel, though, at this point, he doesn't have much choice in what he's doing, which is really interesting. He's born, and his mother keeps her promise, and Samuel does grow up, and he is godly, and he does worship God. And so that's an interesting conversation to have with them. Is it possible that he could have been like Phineas and his brother's crazy name? Peninnah? No, Peninnah is the other wife. 2 sons of Eli. Hophni. I knew it was a weird name. Anyway, Hophni and Phineas, and chosen to not really worship God? To not really do their God jobs? Could he have made that choice? Hannah kept her commitment. Samuel had to make his own choice. And so we have to believe in here at some point, Samuel's faith went from that faith of his mother's to his own, because he does continue, and he is an incredible prophet of God his entire life, leading the country, leading the nation of Israel. So who else? Is Elkanah? Is he part of the Hall of Fame? Yeah, I mean, he supported his wife. He was leading his family in worship and obeying God. He supports what his wife's decisions are, when she says, this is what I've asked God for, and he's given it to me. And so this was the deal. He's in absolute support of her. So yeah, so there's different roles. We each, like we talked about last week or a couple of weeks ago, we each have our own, what God does thing in many ways. What is his way for us to do it? And so you have several examples here. And then Eli is a priest. He obviously worships God, and where he is in his relationship with God, we don't know. But at this point, he is observing, and if you read that whole passage, you do see how he leads Samuel to obey and to worship and reverence God. So Eli's in there. It'll be interesting to see what the kids say about all of that. So today's creative project is to make kind of praying hands, but also open hands. So the kids will have a piece of cardstock and fold it in half, and then they need to trace their hand on it with their thumb on the fold, okay? So this may be a partner job, so that, they trace each other's hands, whatever works best. And then they're going to cut it out, decorate the outsides of their hands, and then with some of those scraps from where they cut their hand out, they're going to make notes of things to give to God, whether it's different stressors in their life, things that they're worried about that they need to write on here and kind of crumple up or whatever and put in their hands, their praying hands, or if it's something they're asking God for and trusting him for, to write that on there and leave it there. So it's that giving it to God like Hannah did. All right. That is this week's lesson. I don't have a physical activity for this so far. If you have one, please say so. That would be awesome. Thank you for leading again this week.